Great. I think we're started there. So, all right. So thanks everyone for joining us today. We're very fortunate to have Ken back again this year. Ken gave us a great presentation last year on calibrations and weed sprayers, and Ken has just recently published another really good calibration document with the Ministry of Agriculture. So we've been back and forth talking about that recently, and I've certainly found your simplified formulas and documents to be helpful, Ken, doing calibrations this spring. So just wanted to revisit that, as well as some other ideas on how to get the best performance out of your equipment. And I know many of you who are online, as well as those who watch the recordings, have purchased new machinery in the last couple of years. So this is a prime time to really get your calibration dialed in as well. So I will let you get started with your presentation, Ken. Let me just make sure that you can share your screen. There we go. That looks like it's working now. Excellent. Thanks, Ken. Take it away.
Yep. Okay. Well, thanks, Molly. And yeah, like that document on Airblast sprayer calibration, I do believe Molly has sent out the link, but later on I will show you how to find it on our webpage as well. So, and if there's you ever need to get a hold of me, there's my email contact at the bottom of the screen. So yeah, I'm available anytime to answer questions. So the one thing that I'm always referring back to is it doesn't matter what biology is or what the chemical choices you make. If you haven't calibrated the sprayer and know that you're getting the product in the right spot, it really doesn't matter. So that's got to be the first thing that you do. You've got thousands of dollars worth of product that you're putting through that sprayer, and it's not going to, the product's not going to work for you if the sprayer hasn't been calibrated properly. I try to break sprayer calibration down into a 4-step system. So we need to look at the inspections and the maintenance to make sure properly. You can't calibrate a sprayer if it is not maintained properly. We need to look at the airflow to match the crop canopy. We need to calibrate the delivery rate of the liquid coming out of the sprayer. And the last step is actually confirming that spray coverage so that you know you're getting it where it needs to be. On maintenance, this is the only slide I'm going to show on maintenance. This is just one of the sprayer inspection checklists. I pulled this one off of Sprayers 101. Jason DeVos has put it up there. It is an excellent, just a simple tool to go through in the spring to make sure that everything is done right. What they kind of recommend is you take it, if you took this, printed this off and laminated it, then you can use a dry erase marker on it. And if you have employees that are going through your checklist, you can ensure that they get it all checked off. And then you just dry erase them off, and you can use it again next year to go through and make sure your machine is working properly. So once you've gone through the checklist, and that is it. I've had a grower say, I just bought a new property. I've got the sprayer that came with it, and I want you to come and help calibrate it. I said, well, you go through the maintenance to make sure it doesn't leak. He said, well, it just had a slow leak, a little bit of a leak, but the guy I bought it from said that was no problem. I said, I will not touch a sprayer that is leaking. It has to be maintained properly. The second step, of course, is the airflow. And this is the step that over the past years before, everyone was concerned about the liquid coming out, but they weren't looking at what the air is doing coming out. You will see there are 3 types of trees here. Here's a large old apple tree. Here's a new apple tree construction, and here's a brand new planting. If you are using the same air on all 3 of these orchards, there's at least 2 of them that you have incorrect airflow. And so you've got to take and match that airflow to your tree structure. How do you adjust the air? Well, Most of the new Airblast sprayers have a 2-speed gearbox, so that's the first place to start. If you're going into that light canopy, you can gear into the lower one, but often there's still too much air coming out, even at that slower speed on your gearbox. So that's where this gear up, throttle down comes in. This method is useful when there's very low leaf cover, dormant sprays, etc., young canopy. So what is gear up, throttle down? It's a way to reduce the power takeoff, but keep your travel speed the same. What you want to do with the airflow is you just want to have the leaves that flutter to the surface to avoid the blow through of the product. Quite often, it's a matter of taking your throttle down so you can slow your PTO from about 450 or 540 down to about 350 or 375. So this is about a 65 to 70% drop in RPM. It slows the fan speed down, but then by using a higher gear on your tractor, you can maintain the tractor speed. And so therefore your calibration factors for tractor speed is still the same. You've got your flow rate of your product, as long as you've got the same pressure on your pressure gauge, it's the same. Like all you've done now is slow that fan down so you're not blowing things right through and past the target that you want. There's some advantages of this, and the less noise from the fan, you'll find they're a lot quieter. And this is becoming a real major impact in our industry, where I know our agronomists continuously get complaints about noisy farm operations, etc. And so we've got a very tight urban rural environment. And so we've got to make sure that we're doing everything possible, first to avoid drift, but also to try to take and keep those good neighbors practices going. It also saves fuel when you're running lower RPM. Where this doesn't work, of course, if you've got a tractor that is underpowered and you're into some hills or steep slopes and it starts to lug down, that's not going to work. You need to make sure your tractor has the power to run it. How do you know when you have the right amount of air? Well, first thing is by attaching ribbons onto your sprayer, you can actually see where the air is going. And this is a good example of a sprayer, and this is parked in blueberries, but the same thing. If you look closely at the ribbons on our left side of what we're looking at, they're actually going down a lot lower than those same 3 ribbons on the right-hand side. Just because the deflectors are set the same on each side of the sprayer does not mean the air is going the same. Those ones are going down because of the turning action of the fan actually causes that air to move downward in that direction. On this sprayer here, to correct that, we would have to take and lift this deflector. It's fairly small, depending on your sprayer type, but there is deflectors on a lot of them now that you can adjust. And so that's what you do, is put those ribbons on. Once you have that air going in the right direction, you don't need to do this again. You know that you're going sideways. The other thing to look at is these top ribbons. Where are they headed? Now on this blueberry field, there should be no nozzles open above that line there or above this line here, because any spray up here is going up. And quite often those top nozzles on a sprayer will be going up, depending on your tree canopy, whether or not you even need to use them. How much air is needed? And this is a new diagram out of the new Airblast 101 book that has just been released in this last winter from Jason DeVoe and a few other authors. But what he's looking at is, again, to determine the air, you tie the ribbons onto the outside of the tree. You're running the sprayer over here, you tie the ribbons to the opposite side of the tree, one near the bottom, one in the middle, and one near the top. And this shows this is the prevailing wind direction. We don't want a lot of wind, but if there is a bit of a wind, always put it, because the sprayer is trying to blow against that wind. Now these ribbons should flutter. They should not stick straight out like it shows in the diagram here, because if they're sticking straight out at 90 degrees, you've got too much wind. What they should be is around this 30 degrees, flutter as the sprayer goes past. But what we need to look at too is, because the canopy of the tree is thicker in the middle than at the bottom, and actually quite often the top of the tree is a tough place to get the air. If we have the bottom ones fluttering and possibly a little bit of flutter, say the top one is hard and it's not showing anything, it's hanging limp, you probably have enough air, because the objective is, just because you're spraying both sides of the tree, that means that with a couple of these ribbons fluttering at that 30-degree mark, that's saying the air is coming through on those ones. Where it's not coming through, it would still be getting to the middle of the tree and depositing that pesticide where it needs to be in that tree. How do you adjust the airflow? Well, we talked about changing the fan speed as one. You can use deflectors. If you have an older sprayer that doesn't have deflectors, I recommend getting them made to take and deflect that air so you can control where it's going. You can reduce the air intake somewhat. There has been some plywood donuts, but you really have to be careful if you're putting that on the fan, because that can definitely have some big impacts on the way the fan operates. And so really be careful with that. And reduce the power takeoff, the gear up, throttle down, in order to get that air at the right amount of air for the type of tree structure you have. That's the first two steps, the maintenance and the air. Now we're looking at calibrating the delivery rate of the spray coming out of the sprayer. In order to calibrate this, you need to know three things. You need to know the tractor speed, the row spacing on your orchard, and the output per nozzle, and the number of nozzles you have open. If you've got different nozzles open, it'll be the output per each of those nozzles added together to create what the output is for that one side. So for determining travel speed, there is formulas that you can use, and nobody likes math. And so instead of using the formulas, what you can do is you can download an app on a smartphone. It must be a GPS app. It must use the global positioning system, not cell towers. It must have a speed that is registered in 1/10 of a kilometer or 1/10 of a mile an hour. And a couple I found is Speed Tractor and GPS KPH. And you can take and use those. Or what I've used is I have an old Garmin, an old GPS satellite navigation system, and it has a speed indicator on it. It also has a suction cup, so I can stick it on any tractor out there. You can also use these type of technology to check the tractor speedometer. If this tractor speedometer is running correctly, then you know that it's going to be working. So it's a way of checking that as well. Tractor speedometers, if you go to your manual, if they're not running correctly, there is a way by doing certain maneuvers in a circulate fashion that you can recalibrate that tractor speedometer if the tire sizes have changed or whatever. So, excuse me, that's one thing you can do as well. So by using some of this technology for your travel speed, you don't need to do any of the math in measuring off a distance. So here's the formula that you need to know. You need to know our row spacing, our travel speed, and our target delivery rate. So I took an example here of a 15-foot row spacing tree. We're traveling 2 miles an hour. And the product states we need to put on 300 gallons per acre, or 2,800 liters per hectare. Normally I work in metric all the time because the labels on all of our pesticide products are in metric. You will not find gallons per acre, liters per acre, or any of that on the label. And so, but I also know that most growers work in gallons per acre. So for this presentation, I'm going to use the gallons per acre. In the fact sheet that I have both formulas. So what it is, to know what the output per side needs to be, we need to know our target delivery rate, which is at 300 gallons per acre. Our travel speed is 2 miles an hour, and our row spacing is 15 feet. We multiply those together and we divide them by the constant. People ask, where does this constant come from? What it is just a constant that converts all of these units. We have gallons per acre, miles per hour, and feet, and we're trying to convert that into gallons per minute per side. And that is that by using that constant, we're able to get all of those different units into what we want. So when I put those numbers into this formula, my output per side on this one says I need to get 9.09 gallons per minute per side. That's telling me what nozzles I have to turn on so that I need to figure out to get that 9 gallons per minute per side. Another example is just a different row spacing. Here we're at 13-foot row spacing. We're now traveling 3 miles per hour, but we only want to put on 100 gallons per acre of this product. We put it into the same formula, so now it's telling us we need 3.94 gallons per minute per side for that type of spray. Now, when you set up your sprayer, depending on what type of tree, that is where you'll need to figure out whether you need to take and distribute it in a pattern, something like this, where you've got 65% going out in the top 2/3 and 35% in the bottom third, or are you running a structure where the trees are consistent, like a high density planting, and you're having the same type of spray through the entire region? And so that is for you to determine on which area, on how much, on the nozzles that need to be turned on to either get pattern A or pattern B, depending on the trees you're spraying. Selecting nozzle tips. There's a lot of nozzles out there, and we need to know what. The flat fan nozzle tips are basically for herbicide or root drench type of system. On the Airblast sprayers, we're using the cone nozzles, the hollow cones usually, but there are also a number of different styles. We can get the disc and core. We can get the ones that are completely molded and colored according to their opening size. And there's also air induction molded nozzles. And we'll talk about all three of these. So the disc and core, they've been around for a long time. A lot of people use them. I've seen them on older sprayers. The one disadvantage with the disc and core is because the swirl plate is inside and then the distribution plate is outside. You do not know what you have for that swirl plate opening unless you take it apart. So you've got to know what is there. If you look at the molded nozzles, the advantage they have is they are a one-piece body and they're color coded. So each color represents a different style, a different opening on that sprayer. And so you know from standing back which nozzles, once you know what they are and which nozzles you want to turn on from the color. So it's much quicker to evaluate that way. So I have created a little bit of a spreadsheet here that I sent to Molly, and she can forward this on to you if you're interested. And we're going to take and go through an example of this spreadsheet here. I'm just going to open it up. So what I've done with this I've taken the actual delivery rate according to the manufacturer specs of when it's set at 100 PSI. And so this is for the T-Jet, the hollow cone tips. And now everything is locked in this spreadsheet except what's in yellow.
And sorry, I'm just going to interject because I'm seeing your screen, but not the copy of the spreadsheet. So we may
Okay,
just need to swap over, please.
I'll need to swap.
Thank you.
Okay, I'll stop sharing and then reshare.
Great.
Okay, have you got it now?
Yeah, that looks great. Thank you.
Okay. So with this, it is only set for 100 PSI. So this is to give you kind of a set on where you are going to take and which nozzles you want to have open. So ask Molly to give me some examples. Okay, first, what is your travel speed going to be, Molly?
Okay, I pulled up an example for a cherry orchard where the growers travel speed in this case was going to be, they've got 3 miles an hour.
Okay, I put 3 in there, and you'll notice all the way down, it changes my travel speed. What is your row spacing on your orchard?
So the row spacing on this one was 14 feet.
14 feet. Okay. So now, do you know what you wanted your delivery rate to be?
Yes, delivery rate was, we were aiming for 100 gallons to the acre.
Okay. So which type of nozzles would you be opening?
All right, so it looked like in this particular case, the grower wants to use some TXVK 18, the orange.
Okay, how many of those?
2, 3 of those, I believe.
Okay.
Oh, hold on, let me see. And then they would like to do the others in blue. Yeah, the 26.
Yep.
That's great. So let's try another. We'll probably have about 7 nozzles open. Let's see if we can get close with.
So a total of 7?
Yeah,
Yeah, okay, so another 4 nozzles.
that's right.
So if we add those 4, by opening 3 of those and 4 of those, we have a delivery rate of 97.85 gallons per acre. So we're hitting pretty close to that. So what this is set up to do is just so that it helps a grower select the nozzles ahead of time for what is target delivery rate. And so there's one example. Down below, I also have the disc and cores. So we'll go through I don't know if you want to go through the same example or do a different example in the disc and cores, Molly.
Yeah, why don't we go similarly, aim for about 100.
Okay.
And 3 miles an hour was the travel speed, 14-foot row. And generally the grower was wanting to use some 6 45s.
Okay. D6 with the 45 swirl plates.
So maybe about, 2 or 3 of those.
Okay, we'll put 2 in there to start with.
And then another 3 of the 5 45s. And then generally in the top portion of the boom, they may have had 1 8 as well.
What was that?
An 8, either 825 or an 845.
An 825.
Yeah.
One of those. So by going with that scenario, you got a little bit high, we're at 116. And so this is where you could do a little bit of adjustment. If you could take and go with 4 of those and only 1 of those if you had that. Okay, we're getting down a little bit closer. Or 1 of those, and go back to 3 of those, they were at 108. So yeah, this is just, but this is the factory setting. We haven't determined that your sprayer is putting out the exact rate of this yet. This just gives you, this was the type of nozzles that I can set up there at the 100 PSI, and it will give me that rate that I'm looking for. It's an easy way to kind of select the nozzles. And so this is giving you your rate in gallons per acre, or I also did the conversion, so it's in liters per hectare. So if you got a tank, and if you're going according to the metrics, you got the liters per acre as well, liters per hectare. I'm going to go back to the presentation now. This is something that if you think is useful for you, I can send it to you, or Molly has a copy of this as well. I've sent to her, and we can get it to you as a nozzle selection tool.
For sure. I can send it out with the recording, Ken. Thank you.
Okay. And now I'll go back to. Okay. So that was just something I've just developed on trying to figure out a way to help growers get that selected. But we still need to check to make sure that our sprayer is putting out that rate. Oh, let's go back, get into. What I have found is that a rubber hose with a 7/8 inner diameter fits nicely over top the nuts that hold your nozzles in place. And so with an Airblast sprayer, whether it is the barrel type or it's got the towers on it, these will fit on and bend down. Now I can able to take and collect that without getting sprayed on and everything else when I'm trying to collect. So you can either do it with those hoses on, collecting over a certain length of time to get your liters per minute coming out of that nozzle to see if it's the same as what the factory setting was supposed to be. Or what I have used is this SpotOn. It works very well. It's easier, faster, and accurate. You just push the button on here. I'm sorry for the blurred photo. It takes, and as soon as you start collecting, there's 2 little points at the back of this. It will collect the liquid. As the liquid gets to the top, it will give you, you can either set it in liters per minute or gallons per minute. And so it will tell you exactly what it is. I have taken and checked an Airblast sprayer. I can do every nozzle on that sprayer in about 20 minutes with this. You mark it down on a sheet, keep a record of what nozzles are putting out what, and that works very well, very fast, makes the job much easier. Again, using a little bit of technology to make it easier to do this calibration. So when we're looking at what is the actual delivery rate now, we're using that same numbers in the formula, but now the formula has switched around because now we have our output per side, and we've just measured that with the delivery rate, and it may be the same. It should be the same as what we just had in that spreadsheet that we looked at earlier, times the constant divided by travel speed, multiplied by row spacing, and it gives us now our actual delivery rate. I talked a bit about air induction nozzles, and air induction nozzles are a nozzle where there is these air holes here on the side of the nozzle. As the spray liquid stream is coming down, it sucks air in, and the air and the droplets mix together so that they end up producing a larger droplets, and these droplets have air bubbles inside them. What this does is those air bubbles, being a larger droplet, they will take and are less driftable. They will also fly harder because you're pushing that with air and it's from your fan that's producing air. That's producing those droplets up above the tree canopy. Gravity will work on them and they drop down in. Once those droplets hit the target, they will break open and cover the target like it should be. For an air blast for trees, it works great to put those in your top few positions that you're using, because they will take and actually reduce the drift and bring it down in to the canopy. If you look at this sprayer here, on the left-hand side is a conventional nozzle, and you can see the mist that we always see when a sprayer is going through. On the right-hand side is the same rate, but now it's air induction nozzles. We don't see it because we don't get those ultrafine droplets coming out. We don't see that mist. So what I recommend is in the top couple positions, you put these air induction nozzles. Two things are going to happen. Those droplets are going to fall back down into your tree canopy, and your neighbors are not going to see that mist blowing around above the tree canopy as well. So you end up with that happier neighbor scenario. There is a difference, however, in the droplet size out of an air induction nozzle, whether your nozzles are inside the airstream or if they're outside the airstream and pushed in. Like a turbo mist will use that, and you get some air shear happening here. So the droplet size of an air induction nozzle, when it's inside the stream, may be this big. When it's outside and pushed into that stream, you get a smaller droplet. It's still larger than the non-air induction, the hollow cone, the standard nozzles. So it's still larger than that, and it still takes and will come down into the canopy, but it's not as large. So you can get two different size droplets out of these nozzles depending on how your sprayer is actually designed. So that covers the first three steps of calibration. The last step is confirming spray coverage. That's done with water sensitive paper, and this is a tool that every grower should have. You could place this water sensitive paper inside your canopy where you want to make sure your target is hitting. If you're targeting the fruit, put it where the fruit is. If you're targeting the canes, make sure you've got it where the canes or the branches are, depending where you're trying to target. So when you're using water sensitive paper, you need to wear gloves because it is both water and oil sensitive. And so the oils in your hand can leave a fingerprint on it or whatever. Usually fold it in half and clip it on so that I check not just the side that the sprayer is coming from, but also the backside. What type of swirl, what type of action do I get? Mark the location in flagging tape because it's surprising how these things can hide in the trees. Label the back of them so that you know whether it's the top, middle, or bottom, where it was located in the tree. And you cannot use these on a wet or a humid day because just the high humidity will take and actually start turning these things blue any place that water hits. Set them on the dry surface and check the spray as per normal practice. Quite often what we'll do with these is after you check the spray, take a photo of it with the labels on where they're located. So then you've got a record of what's happening because these will not keep. Just the moisture in the air will eventually turn those blue because they're kept in sealed packets to avoid that. When you're checking them, obviously, if this is what you end up with, you're not getting the spray there and you've got to do something to change. But also, this is not required. You know, when you're looking at doing a drench, you want to get maybe not quite that much. But for most of our products, this is all the coverage that you need. And this is what you should be aiming for. It's 10 to 15% coverage. Also works out to 85 droplets per square centimeter. But that's what you're looking at. We do not need to completely saturate everything with the products that we're using. So just a summary on calibration. know what the pesticide label says. That's where you always have to start, is with the label. Make sure all sprayer parts are in good working conditions, working properly. Set the air for the tree size. And if you have some new plantings and some older mature orchards, you're going to have to change the air between one and the other. Match the spray distribution to your target. Check the coverage. Make sure there's minimal drift. And I say calibrate often, but really what you need to do, you need to do a good calibration first thing in the spring. You should calibrate every time you do a major change in the rate that you are applying to make sure that you're matching what you need to be putting on. Like I said, there's one formula. This is the formula for actual delivery rate that is happening in the field. And the calibration fact sheet, like I said, all of this information is in the fact sheet. If you don't have a copy of it, what I find the easiest way is just to do a search for pesticides in agriculture, BC. Click on the BC Ministry link, and you will come to a page where halfway down the page it says Airblast Sprayer Calibration Fact Sheet, and you can open it that way. So with that, open for questions if anyone has anything that
Great, thanks so much, Ken. Definitely we can open up the floor for questions or discussion. If there's any there.
Hi, Molly. Hey, Ken.
Hi, Wayne.
Hello.
If I may, just one of the things when you mentioned about adjusting the wind and lowering the RPM, one of the things that I do find there is sometimes when you're lowering the RPM, I know you put down there 350, tractors don't always, depending on the terrain. So what I've been finding is a little bit that if you lower it too much, it becomes a problem. So what I tend to do is try and increase the speed, the drive speed a little bit more. That tends to help as well. And it's just trying to find a balance between the two. And like I say, a lot of the stuff is flat, but we have quite a few hills here as well, and it gets a little difficult when you go on that low RPM. So I found that the majority, a lot of the sprayers I'm working on around about, you could probably only get to 480, maybe 440, but on the flatter ground, you're getting close to that 400, 380. And what's great there is you can open a little bit of the throttle and try and go a little bit quicker.
Yeah, thanks, Wayne. Yeah, that's like, it all depends on the individual, his terrain, how much horsepower, extra horsepower he has in his tractor. And yeah, the other thing that I didn't mention is that the gear up, that the throttle down does not work on the air shear sprayers. These are the ones that do not have any nozzles on them, but the spray is injected right into the airstream. They require that higher airstream in order to create the droplets and get that pesticide into the small droplets for that airstream. And so anything I've read state that does not work with those air shear type of sprayers.
Ken, I've got a question. What's the best way to account for changing leaf area through the season with your calibration? For example, at petal fall stage, there's very little leaf there. And by close to harvest, there's a lot of leaf surface area that can impact your coverage. Would you adjust or change anything in your calibration from beginning to end of season?
Yeah, well, first of all, you should be changing your airflow for one thing, because of the different amount of leaf on it. You should be have lower air to the start and more once you get the full canopy. The other one is coverage on the leaf, and by checking that coverage with water sensitive paper, and I can't really recommend people cut rates, but what it it does. If Jason DeVoe on, if you go to Sprayers 101 and do a search for Orchard Max, he has created a mobile app that uses the area of the tree and whatnot to determine how much you should be applying. So, you know, when you got a lot less leaf coverage, if you're using the same rate than the final coverage, you're going to take and be applying a lot more product per leaf area than later on. And it's one of the problems with our labels. They're set on a per area basis, not on a three-dimensional. And so what I suggest is use your water sensitive paper, check your coverage to make sure that you're getting coverage when you need. You're probably having no problem getting the coverage at petal fall, but you've got to make sure that you're getting good coverage once you have the full leaf area on the trees.
Yeah, I think in practicality, what growers often do is, as the season advances, to try and improve coverage is either slow down or perhaps increase nozzle size to apply more water volume. That doesn't always improve spray coverage,
Yeah.
But you know, when you get a dense canopy, coverage becomes the issue as much as anything.
Yeah.
As you say, it's not the effect of the product; it's getting it onto the leaf and uniformly covered.
And that's where I saw a demonstration where we were in high density apples that were probably 15 feet tall, and the sprayer, when it went through the first time and we did water sensitive paper, we had actually zero product reaching the top of that tree. And so by putting those air induction nozzles in the top two nozzle positions that were opening, we were able to throw that droplet up there. A good example of that is if you took a golf ball and a ping pong ball and you chuck the ping pong ball, that's like your fine droplets. How far is it going to go? Now you take that same force and you chuck a golf ball, how far is it going to go? That's your air induction droplet. So you can throw it to the top of the tree, but because it's larger, gravity works on it and it pulls it back down and it comes down into that tree. So that's why I like those air induction nozzles in the top positions.
Great. Do we have any other questions from anyone? Hold on, Dawn. Let me see if we can unmute you.
And you unmute yourself there. I think you're unmuted, Dawn.
So I have tried to pay more attention to air volumes this year. And I found I was able to kind of at, just around before bloom for my pre-bloom sprays, I was able to get my PTO down to about 340 and get good coverage and still maintain a constant speed on my track. It's a New Holland tractor with a turbo mist sprayer. And then I bumped it up since then to 380, and I'll probably bump it up once more to my normal full speed is about 480 to 500 RPM, but I'll probably try and bump it up once more to 440, 450. It takes more time. I have to check my speeds. The one link I'm missing is I got to hang more water sensitive paper out there, but I do feel like I'm getting, just from observation, I'll go out and I'll have my son drive and I watch the coverage or we switch. I think I'm getting, a much better coverage instead of just blowing it past the trees. So, but it takes time and, a willingness to constantly kind of look at your calibration.
Yep. No, and that's it. And if you've got two of you out there, and that's where those ribbons on the outside of the tree, if you hang a few ribbons on there, you cannot do it by yourself because if you park the sprayer, you're going to get the ribbons blowing at 90 degrees. It's because as the drive past, the amount of air that's there to cause that flutter. And that's where, like Wayne says, you can also change the amount of that flutter with your speed. If you go slower, you're going to get more air movement into that tree. If you go faster, you get less air movement. And so, yeah, there's just, once you to fine tune your operation, it takes a little bit of time and understanding the systems.
I think the thing that impacts the ability to go at lower RPM too is your topography. And if you're on flat ground, it becomes easier. And if you're going uphill versus and downhill, the next
Yep.
pass, it changes things quite a little. And with a weak tractor, your ability to use a lower RPM going uphill is pretty limited.
Just if I may comment there, there's, you know, so often the tractors all got different gears, but if you could take the time, and it goes down to what Don's saying, I try and recommend trying to get 3 different RPMs. I aim for a low RPM under the 400s. I aim for a mid RPM, and then I try and get one around 500, because 3 times in the season, you're going to need different RPMs. As Ken said, as the tree's filling up, you're going to need a little bit more wind. The problem is not all tractors are geared equally. And so you just got to work with what you have. And if you're not getting those RPMs, you will have to change your calibration, because it's very hard to set 3 different speeds to try and maintain the same 3 calibrations. So the variables are always changing. And this is what I try and help people with, that once you've done it the first year, the second year is really all done for you. And it's just a matter of tweaking it. So Don, as much time as you're putting it in now, you'll notice that you and your son next year will probably do it in a third of the time, because you have already your parameters all set and you have something to work with. It's when you don't have that to work with that it takes time, but it comes, right?
Yeah, and keeping good records, and that's it. Keep a record of where you got it set this year, so that's your starting place next year.
And I do use that Turbo Mist calibration site, and I find it very useful. Thank you.
Ken, I think we have another question. It might have come to your inbox, or I can read it out.
Go ahead and read it out.
The question is there any difference in coverage and approach or tactics between different makes of sprayers that use high volume, low wind speed Airblast versus a low volume, high wind speed?
No, I think the principles are the same. You've got to take and get your air set for your coverage, and the amount of coverage you want with the droplets size and the amount of just delivery rate needs to be set. All of those sprayers, you can take and readjust those things. And so the only, there is that slight difference, like I showed with the air induction nozzles, that with the air shear sprayers, like, or they're set outside like a Turbo Mist, they're a smaller droplet, but they're still larger than the fine droplets that we have. But otherwise, the principles are the same. And the biggest thing, check coverage.
I have a question, Molly.
Go ahead, Danny.
So I've got a Turbo Mist. This might be a question more for the Turbo Mist guys then. So the way I've been managing airflow is just by changing the fan speed from low to high. So when I'm in the high density plantings, I've been running on low speed. And when I get into the mature canopy, the big cherry trees, I've been running on high. Is that a mistake? Like, should I really be looking at RPM changes, or is the fan speed a tool I can use?
I would say the fan speed is your first tool.
Okay.
You use that one because it's the easy setting, because you've got the 2 different fan speeds, but you know, then go out and check to make sure that, like, early in the season, even your low fan speed, depending on the sprayer you have, might be putting out too much when you've got very little canopy out there. And so that's when you might need to slow down the RPMs a little bit. Wayne, what's your thoughts?
Oh, absolutely. You know, start off in the gear, in a low gear, whether it's cherries or apples. The least amount of horsepower you're using is fine, and then just adjust as you're moving on. And it comes back to your speeds, knowing what speed and knowing what wind you're going to produce sort of at 3 different times. So I typically always try and put a sprayer in low gear when we start, And I don't believe in high density apples you need a high gear, but certainly the cherries, depending on how big those cherries and how much foliage you're getting and what kind of speed. Remember, the quicker you're driving, what happens, how can I put it? A lot of people in California with the big trees, what they try and do is get more horsepower so they can produce more wind so they can drive faster through the canopy. So, so it's all about managing the wind. So to answer your question, you just need to set them at various stages, and but start your fan on low and then work up from there. Because
Okay,
as the
so-
canopy fills up, and again, it comes down to Ken telling you to check the wind going through the canopy, because if you have too much, you can slow it down. If you don't have enough, you can then pick it up.
Okay.
Great. Ken, could you make a comment on pressure as well, please?
Yeah, the pressure, like most of these nozzles that we're using on our Airblast sprays are set for 100 psi. Is kind of the average, and you can actually change your pressure a little bit to adjust your flow rates, but pressure doesn't change it as much as travel speed or changing your actual nozzles that you have open. So I like to keep the pressure constant. By increasing pressure, you're not going to blow it any further. That's one of the misconceptions that people have, that if they increase the pressure, they're going to blow the product farther into it's the air that is moving it up and in. All of the nozzles that we have, once that droplet gets 8 to 12 inches away from the nozzle, it has zero velocity on its own. It'll just drop to the ground. So it needs that air to move it. And so, yeah, so that's where these nozzles work best, is in that 100 psi. That's why that little bit of a spreadsheet I set up for the 100 psi. There you can take and go up and down to set it, to fine tune it a bit, but it doesn't. You're better off to switch to different size nozzles. The other thing that I didn't mention, and we've seen this, and typically when you use, farmers been using the disc and core, and maybe they've gone out in the spring and they've pulled some nozzles out and they found a worn out disc or a broken one inside, and so they just replaced it. Without checking on it, you can end up with, and I've seen sprayers this way, with completely different nozzles configuration on each side of the sprayer. They've got to be matched. When the formulas I have is the distribution per side. So you're checking one side and then you put that number into the formula. Well, if the nozzle configuration on the other side of the sprayer is different, you're not going to take and have the same distribution. So that's the thing. Go through your sprayer. Make sure that all of those swirl plates inside are identical. Make sure the output holes are the same, so the sprayer is matched on each side.
Thanks for mentioning that. That's a common one that I see in the field,
Yeah.
that nozzles get swapped out with whatever's available. So
It's one of the advantages of the preformed nozzles. If they're color coded, you can tell from standing back whether they're all matched or not. But also there are some limitations to those. By going to the 45 swirl plates, you can get to a higher water volume than you can with just by using the straight preformed nozzles. So on some of the high volume sprays, you may not get to what you need to if you don't have all of the largest nozzles in. Typically as well, with most of those sprayers, shut the bottom nozzle off. That one is typically pointing towards the ground. And I don't know much that we need to spray on the ground unless you're spraying a herbicide.
great. Are there any other questions or comments or any final words, or Wayne and Kelly, if you had anything more that you wanted to add to the discussion?
So just there was a question about the various equipment versus air shear and nozzle. So one of the biggest primary, and like Ken says, an air shear system works on dropping the droplet into the wind stream then breaking into about a 50 micron. Typically you set at that micron, you cannot change that. And as soon as you start slowing down your RPM, you get what you call blodging or splodging. The nice thing about a nozzle system is you can independently change the nozzle where you want. You can change the flow into certain zones. You can change the droplet size. So with a nozzle system versus an air shear system, you have the ability to dial in the spray a lot more accurate, if that's the right way of saying. Correct, Ken?
Yep. Yeah. No, it just gives you the operator more control over it.
Yeah, and that's the biggest thing I'm finding is in spraying. It's keeping control. I've been to a couple of farms just over the last weeks where they claim they were doing 100 gallons an acre and probably using 11 nozzles on a high density, brought them down to 5 nozzles. The apples going about 2 feet over the 10-foot wire, trellis wire. And on those 5 nozzles with the nozzle position and the nozzle droplet, the coverage was phenomenal. And the 100 gallons that we were putting on now looks a lot more than that they were doing. So all you're doing is really bringing all your spray and keeping it on the target, right? And that's what you can do. So when you start doing it right, 100 gallons is going to look like a lot more. So there you are.
Great. Well, thank you very much for joining us today. And thanks a lot, Ken, for preparing that presentation and the information. I'll be sure to send out the documents to growers so that they can follow up. And if there's any questions, can follow up with you. But I'll probably wrap it up there unless there's any final questions or words from anyone. Looking good. All right.
Thanks, Molly, for setting it up.
Great. Thanks for joining us.
Thank you.